Last Epoch has several rare and powerful endgame items. You could think of these as chase items. Now, there aren't direct equivalents to Path of Exile's endgame chases. There is no Headhunter, for example. No Headhunter-like effect, even. There's one item which in many ways functions quite similarly to Path of Exile's Mageblood. This is obtained by killing the Shade of Orobyss at 200 plus corruption, and it's an amulet known as Omnis, which is exactly what I want to talk about on today's video. Because I think the implications for Buildcraft are really cool, and you should be including it in a lot of builds if you're able to obtain one. Okay, so why am I saying that Omnis is the Mageblood of Last Epoch? And why is this item so special anyway? Isn't it just a bunch of resistances? And can't you just get resistances on your items? Yes, you can get resistances on your items, and yes, it is a bunch. And unlike Path of Exile, you're not usually swapping defensive stats like resistances for offensive stats like damage. But Omnis gives a lot of resistances. Effectively, the 1 to 45% range means that you get up to tier 5 of every single resistance in the game. And much like how, when you fix every resistance you have with a Mageblood, you can focus on damage, in Last Epoch, when you fix every resistance you have with an Omnis, you can focus on other forms of defenses. In Last Epoch, the best defense is actual defense. So, what Omnis does is allows you to focus on that. Suffixes that would have gone to resistance can now go to health, or hybrid health, or health crit avoid, or health armor, or maybe you get to use crit avoid and drop the blessing, giving you access to extra power. Alternatively, maybe you're a res stacking build. My current character stacks necrotic resistance. This not only scales my damage, but also scales my defenses. And yes, I'm getting 526%, in part because I can use Omnis to cover many other resistances across the board, so that I can focus on necrotic res suffixes, which otherwise would just be putting me way over cap and not providing value. If you want to know more about how I'm using necrotic res stacking or my build in general, don't worry, the build guide's going to be coming out soon, and the best way to not miss it is to get subscribed. Maybe you leave a like while you're down there to send happy signals to the algorithm. But for now, I wanted to talk about a few other uses for Omnis. Much like Mageblood in Path of Exile, I like that Omnis is build enabling. It lets you do cool things which otherwise you just wouldn't be able to because you're lacking for resistances. One example of this is a low life build. It's very hard to get Exsanguinous, and Last Steps of a Living, and possibly Twisted Heart of Ukaros. And combine all that stuff while also meeting your resist burden, while also stacking as much life as possible to get as much ward as possible. Because the more life you have, the more ward you generate per second. And so how do you fix those pesky resistances? Well, for one, you can get the All-Res Blessing, that's 20%, and you can add Omnis. All of a sudden, that's 65% assuming perfect rolls. Let's be honest, you're not going to hit perfect rolls. So let's say 55% for a really well-rolled Omnis across the board. And so now you get to go absolutely crazy stacking life for all those suffixes. And as you do, remember, your ward gained per second scales off of your maximum life per second, because the way these items work is by giving you ward based on the percent of missing life. So you get significantly more ward at 2,000 or 3,000 health than at 1,000. This is an example of a high investment build that, in my opinion, is absolutely enabled by Omnis. You'll probably be able to play a version of low life ward stacking, but it's not going to be as good without the effect. Just like how in Path of Exile there's a lot of builds that absolutely start to shine once you can put on those 3 elemental resistance flasks and fill up all your suffixes, such as non-Omni attribute stackers. They gain an absolutely massive advantage because you can use your suffixes for attributes instead of having to dedicate them to resistances. Now, another way to use this is on a Morning Frost build. In the case of Morning Frost, you stack dexterity to gain a bunch of damage for attacks, spells, or really whatever you want. It's a genuinely excellent item, which I played previously when I was using Dive Bomb on Falconer. And if you want to check out my Dive Bomb Falconer, don't worry, it'll be up in the card down below after this. The important part of that is I was using it to scale not only the Falcon, but also the Ballista, which is an interesting application. However, Morning Frost isn't all sunshine, roses, and free damage. Well, it kind of is. But it comes with a slight downside of reducing your cold resistance and physical resistance. So how are you going to get resist capped if you have like a negative 200 of each? That's a lot of suffixes. Well, there's this magical device called an Omnis that you can put on. So if you normally had a resistance suffix for poison, don't worry about it, just get Phys Res. Normally you need Necrotic Res, but your Omnis happens to be well rolled there, so just replace it with a Cold Res roll. Maybe you'll take a Void Res Blessing, although crit multi is kind of important, so maybe not. And as you fill these out, again, you get to use Omnis so that you're able to do something that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. Because normally, the resistance burden is quite high and leads to sacrificing a lot of extra defenses when you're using Morning Frost. It's why a lot of the Morning Frost builds you see are kind of just glass cannons, which admittedly, if you kill everything off screen or freeze everything permanently, you can sometimes get away with. But generally, even though I'm not pushing the highest corruption, because honestly I find pushing super high corruption to be really tedious, I like a well-rounded build that doesn't fall over the minute I stop spamming all my buttons. Also, much like Mageblood, you can kind of shove it into any build that doesn't explicitly require another amulet. However, your mileage may vary. Just shoving it in definitely gets you more power. And you get 3+1 to all skills, fix some res, all that fun stuff. However, the amulet truly shines when it's working synergistically to fix a hole in your build. Just like how in Path of Exile, Mageblood truly shines when it's working to enable cool stuff that would otherwise not be possible. Even if it does, again, make existing builds better regardless. But here's the really big difference between Mageblood and Omnis. Mageblood is a super rare, super difficult chase item that most players aren't going to obtain, even with all the ridiculous loot that we got with Affliction. Omnis is something that if you set this as your goal, you want to farm it, you get to the corruption, and you just do Orobyss until it drops, there's a pretty darn good chance you'll be able to get one and use it in your build. But it's also kind of like Venter's Gamble. You might get a crap one, in which case you're going to have to go back to farming for quite a while. So getting an Omnis, maybe even getting an Omnis with LP, is an achievable goal, especially if you're Circle of Fortune. 2-3 LP, good luck, that's going to be real tough. But 1 LP is definitely doable if you're willing to put in the time. But getting a high LP with good mods, well-rolled Omnis, is where things get more aspirational. And I think that's really cool, because it means more people get to play with fun tools while still having that ultimate chase. And so I'm curious, how would you use an Omnis if you got one right now? Or if you're currently wearing one, how are you using it in your build? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. And if you're going to farm an Omnis for yourself, then maybe you want to know more about boss rushing, in which case you might want to check out my boss rushing video after you finish watching this one. Link to that will be up in the card and down in the description. Of course, before I go, I'd like to take a minute to thank my patrons and channel members for the continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can all make videos just like this one possible. And also thank you to everyone who watched to the end. When it comes to ARPGs, my favorite aspect is the buildcraft, so when I find cool and powerful mechanical interactions or really awesome items, I like talking about it so that you can make your own fun and cool builds. And so I hope you learned something, glad you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.